We are the Anti-Racist Table, and my name is Lynn. My sister is Kirsten, and we started this platform just 4 months ago, just a little bit under 4 months ago. And we began just working with a 30-day challenge. We wanted to do something about all of the racism and hate that we were experiencing and everyone was experiencing, just this racial reckoning that was happening with the death of George Floyd. And we were just so devastated by it. We just felt like we needed to create a platform to kind of be a healing balm, to kind of be a place where people could come together to learn, grow, to commit themselves to working with purpose and intention to dismantle hate and racism and all of the injustices in the world. And so cultivating this daily practice was something that we felt needed to be supported. And so that was kind of the beginning of Anti-Racist Table with our 30-day challenge. If you are not already taking our challenge, you can go to our website and sign up. It's free. And we incorporate a lot of mindfulness practice. A lot of the experts in anti-racist work, we work with a lot of their approach to dismantling hate and racism and working with guilt and shame within yourself so that you can cultivate love and kindness in yourself and in your family and in your workplace and your community. And so hopefully we're going to be rippling out from the individual all the way to the wider community. We do offer accountability letters because we think it's really important to not just do this work. It's not a moment, it's a movement. And so in order to really keep up the momentum, you have to be held accountable. Ourselves, we need to be held accountable. So doing this with a buddy or a friend is really good to kind of keep yourselves motivated to do the work. But we also offer accountability letters that we have created that are on our website that are free as well. And you can take them to your school, you can take them to your workplace, to your local officials, just so that they know that you know what racist policies look like and that you are really wanting to be part of change for the better to bring anti-racist policies to these areas. And we offer now a resource book that is a companion to our 30-day challenge. It's all of our communication resources, all of our mindfulness practices, our daily mantra that we've created, along with our core principles are in that. You can download that as well from our website. And we have these lovely events like this one today, which are our conversations around the table, where we really are happy to invite co-conspirators and our allies that are working side by side with us in this work around the table for conversation, for community, for sharing, for learning. And today we are honored to have Oren Jay Sofer. And my sister will introduce him very shortly. We would like to start also just with a bit of paying respect to the land that we are on and to kind of come into settling into the space where we each are coming from, and just kind of in the mindfulness practice of being present to where you are, learning more, digging a little bit deeper into understanding the place that you are in, and just thinking about those who have come before us, who are on the land that we are each on now. We would like to start with the land acknowledgement. And I think in the chat box, Kirsten has put in the land map that you can use to find your location. You can find the native people that were living on the land prior to colonization, which is very important. So this land acknowledgement that we will be doing today is inspired by Ruth King, who is also a mindfulness practitioner. And I just love the way that she acknowledges the land. So Now we would like to call on our ancestors to stand with me and to stand with us as we acknowledge the native custodians of this land, those people that are named, those people that are unnamed, that are known and unknown, those from the past and those from the present. We honor all traditions and traditional custodians of this region. And today we are calling in from the Piscataway land, which is the land from our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding suburbs. We recognize the continued connection of these Native people with this land, to the water, and to this community. And we pay respect to the earth, whose generous resources sustain us every day. We pay respect to the enslaved African people of this land who were brought here and who were held and sold here, and all of their descendants. And we also honor all of the people throughout the world who are in captivity. We pay respect to their spiritual labor, and we pay respect to our ancestors whose unwise relationships with race and racism we have inherited. We pay respect to our teachers and our elders, past and present and emerging, and all of the young people who today are teaching us. We honor this gathering and everyone that is here, and especially Oren Jay Sofer for taking time and his energy to be with us today. May we recognize that we all share an aspiration for liberation, to be free. Ashe.
And with that, I'd like to, before I introduce Oren, I would just like to say a few words to honor the life and legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who we lost on Friday, who has been a champion for equality and equity and has meant so many things to the American people for the incredible and empowering work that she has done throughout the course of her life. And we just we're thankful for her existence and for all that she contributed, and we're thinking of her loved ones in this time. We also want to just say to those celebrating Rosh Hashanah that we honor that. Now with that, we'd like to introduce Oren Jay Sofer. Oren Jay Sofer teaches Buddhist meditation, mindfulness, and nonviolent communication nationally. He's a member of the Spirit Rock Teachers Council. He holds a degree in comparative religion from Columbia University. He is the author of Say What You Mean, A Mindful Approach to Nonviolent Communication. And I was looking around, I left my copy downstairs, but I can tell you that it is well worn, well loved, and tabbed in every color and highlighted. So please get it. He is also the co-author of Teaching Mindfulness to Empower Adolescents. That is also with my Say What You Mean book downstairs. Oren is co-founder of Mindful Healthcare and the founder of Next Step Dharma, which is an innovative online program that helps meditators integrate their retreat experiences into daily life. You can find him on social media at Oren Jay Sofer, and you can also find him online at, I believe it's just orenjaysofer.com. And with that, thank you so much, Oren. We're honored to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Lynn. It's a real pleasure to be here. Maybe we could stop the slide share so that we can all just see each other. Yeah, so I think folks are familiar with Zoom. You can switch between speaker and gallery view if you like. Just want to look at your faces and see some of the names here before we get started. I invite you to do the same. Just getting a sense of being here together, right? If we were in a room, we would be able to feel just being around each other. But since we're not, we've got this pixels. So just taking in your faces. As I said, I'm really grateful, Kirsten and Lynn, to both of you for not only for inviting me, but for creating this space and for the work that you're doing to create community and provide resources, support, inspiration, encouragement to do this important work, both individually and as a community. We'll do a meditation in a little bit. I'll lead us through a short practice. But I want to start just kind of building on the land acknowledgement that that Lynn read. That was so beautifully crafted by Ruth King. There's a author and trauma specialist, anti-racist educator, Resmaa Menakem. Some of you are familiar with him or his work, his book, My Grandmother's Hands. And he has this phrase that he uses whenever he starts a session teaching a land acknowledgement. That's been really powerful for me in my own practice and my own life that I wanted to bring in here as we get started today. And that phrase is, something happened here. Something happened here. And he acknowledges, my feet are on indigenous land. And the first time I heard that, I got chills down my body. It put into context for me not just the history of colonialism, land theft, enslavement of this country, but also my own personal history, the trauma that I've lived through in my own life and my family of origin, and that sort of lingering effect in the heart and in consciousness of trauma, of this kind of shadow, that there's something there that's not being named, that's coloring the present. And so for me, there's something so powerful about those words, something happened here. That's this, it's so, I feel tears welling up inside even just saying it, because it's so understated. And to me, it points to the magnitude of the history that is informing the present for all of us, and the limitation of language to actually encompass or name that which cannot be named. So one of the themes that I think we'll explore today that, Lynn and Kirsten suggested when they reached out and invited me to join this conversation today was being with discomfort. And the discomfort of acknowledging where we've come from as a society, as a nation, whether you're in the United States or wherever you are, the history of that state. How do we meet the pain and the discomfort of whatever it is we're carrying individually, collectively? So to do that, we need a resource, right? We need resilience. We need something to stand on from which to meet the pain and the immensity a little bit at a time of what it is that we're trying to metabolize, again, both individually and as a society. And I think from my perspective, a lot of what we're seeing play out both globally in national politics here in the United States and around the world in different ways, as well as in our communities, is the effects of the inability to metabolize the past. This kind of fracturing or splitting of the collective psyche, fracturing or splitting of communities, where instead of one of the definitions of trauma is unintegrated resource. It was a really fascinating definition. I think it's from Vessel van der Kolk. Because to survive trauma, it takes great strength. To get through anything that is by definition traumatic. Another definition of trauma is anything that is perceived as life-threatening, that breaches the protective boundary of the self. So to get through something like that takes a lot of resource and resilience. And so the resolution of trauma means integrating the strength that allowed us to survive, to get through it. And so as a society, the fact that we have been unable to come to terms with the history of colonialism, of enslavement, of the sort of thousands of years of patriarchy, the domination of the land, all of that in these kind of multiple layers, kind of reiterating the same pattern of disconnection and domination. When it's not integrated, then there's this polarization and tension. So that's a lot, but I just kind of wanting to frame a little bit the meditation that I want to offer, which is actually not going into the discomfort, but turning towards that which is strengthening. Because again, we need that sense of a base from which to meet, contend with, understand, and integrate the past. So I'll share one more thing, and then we'll do a little guided meditation. I think Kirsten and Lynn and I are going to have some conversation with a few points, and then we'll have a good chunk of time at the end for some questions and discussion. Being with the discomfort of confronting racism, white supremacy, male supremacy, patriarchy, those are just the various ways that these patterns and systems have infiltrated all of our hearts and minds. One of the core principles behind anti-racist work that I'm sure most, if not all of us, are familiar with is this distinction between the person and the behavior. And this is not unique to anti-racism. This is at the heart of nonviolence, right? You know, Gandhi said, "Hate the sin, not the sinner." You can trace it back to the New Testament, to the teachings of Christ. I mean, it's a universal principle that shows up in different ways. That's pointing to the good, something good in human spirit. That there's something within the human heart that is whole and beautiful, that can't ever be erased. And that the actions of hatred and harm or confusion that we engage in, whether it's physical actions, things that we say, or even holding certain ideas and views that are harmful, or the policies that are enacted on a collective level, that there's a distinction between those actions of body, speech, or mind, as we say in Buddhism, and the person. And so to be able to do this work of confronting racism within ourselves requires a capacity to be with and tolerate the discomfort of seeing within our own hearts and minds that which is ugly, hateful, confused, narrow. And what I see in myself is that the more I'm able to be grounded in and really deeply know my own goodness beyond the person. And that's the thing. This is beyond, like, Oren, who grew up in New Jersey, who's Jewish and Buddhist, and beyond the sense of the personality, but something more fundamental that's basic about being human. The more we can be rooted in that with a deep sense of trust in our own fundamental goodness. The concept of basic goodness shows up in different traditions, both spiritual and anti-racist. The more resilience we have to meet the discomfort, because it doesn't challenge our sense of identity and who we are, and we can start to tease those apart. So that's just some of the theoretical framework I'm wanting to bring to the conversation, and particularly this meditation. So stuff's been stimulated. You've got questions. Great. Just make a mental note of it, so we can come back to it later, and take maybe 10 to 15 minutes here. It won't be too long. So I invite you to sit comfortably. Don't have to have any special posture, but just a sense of being at ease. And if you'd like to turn your attention inwards, either by closing your eyes or just letting your eyes gaze down at the ground. I often find it helpful to take a few slow, deep breaths as a way of shifting gears. If you'd like to join me, breathing in through your nose and breathing out through your mouth, long and slow. Just feeling any settling, any ease or relaxation that comes in your body or mind on the out breath. And again, filling your lungs fully and deeply, breathing in through your nose. And breathing out through your mouth. See if you can notice the weight of your body resting on the chair or the places where your body touches the ground. Just with some recognition of being here on the earth. This very body, which is a part of the earth. And can you feel the support of the ground, that there's something steady beneath us? There's something solid that receives us, that holds us here. And we don't need to earn it. We don't need to work, try to be good enough or accomplish something to be part of the earth. It's given. It's just like this body is given to us. And so we arrive in our body, we arrive with our breath, arrive on the planet. This is a quote from my friend and colleague Mickey Kashtan. Delving into the history of race relations in the United States is a sorrowful activity, and much faith in humanity is needed to be able to emerge from such explorations and still believe that anything positive is possible. Much faith in humanity is needed. So just inviting us to touch into that sense of the goodness that's present. And first, I invite you to bring to mind any moment of goodness that you've witnessed, seen, or know of in life, great or small. Someone smiling, offering a hug, holding out a hand. It's this gesture of being available, being here for one another. And I invite you to make it really specific, not just a general imaginary moment, but something that has actually happened that you can focus on. And it could even be as simple as tending to your pet and the quality of care and tenderness present in that action. So whether it's a moment or action that someone else has done or that you've done, letting that become clear in your mind. See if you can hone in on the goodness, the movement of the heart to help, to connect, to show kindness, understanding, or generosity. That there is this potential in all of us. And part of what allows that potential to manifest is our sense of connection. That as human beings, there's more we have in common than we have that separates us. And so seeing if you can internalize that sense of goodness, bringing to mind now something in your own life. A moment of care, of warmth, of patience or listening, of giving. Even choosing to join this call today. The beautiful seed of compassion and aspiration at the heart of that choice. Can you begin to honor and acknowledge that goodness? As you breathe, as you feel your body sitting, you're really starting to internalize it, to let it in. There's something fundamental here that can't be erased. that connects us to the entire human family. It's that which aches when we see pain, that which protests when we see injustice. This deep care in the heart that feels, that's connected. Seeing if you can honor and receive the goodness of that place inside. Just taking it one moment at a time. If your mind wanders, you can come back to the image or memory of that moment or act of goodness, or you can just come back to the feeling of your own heart there in the center of your chest. And sometimes our goodness is so intimate, so close to us that we overlook it. It's like trying to see your own eyes. You're looking through them, so it's actually impossible to see them, but you can be aware. You can be aware that that goodness is here, that it's animating our life. And so then from this place of a deep knowing, to whatever degree it's present for you of your own goodness, just invite you to bring to mind some aspect of your own journey in anti-racism, anti-oppression, this movement for justice and equity, some aspect of that journey that's uncomfortable. Perhaps not starting with the most difficult piece, the discomfort of the privileges that those of us who are white or male may receive through our society. The uncertainty of what's to come, the current political landscape, or any other facet that you're aware of. And see if you can hold that discomfort in the context of your heart's own goodness. Staying aware of your body, feeling your breathing. If you like, you can let your attention shift back and forth, feeling your heart, your connection to the earth, the sense of the basic goodness of being human. And then that which is difficult or uncomfortable. Shadows of guilt, shame, helplessness, anger, frustration. Whatever's present, just letting there be space. Taking another minute or so to just let your attention move back and forth between those two, however you like. And then in your own time, allowing the whole thing to fade and dissolve. Just coming back to the simplicity of feeling your own body sitting here, your breath. Okay. Thank you for joining me for that.
Thank you, Oren. That was lovely. Does anyone want to share kind of what the goodness was that brought kind of a centering to them? I can tell you for me, it was an image of my child when they were 4 months old, all, you know, with lots of rolls, smiling and was full of joy and wonder, you know, just that kind of innocence of that, you know, new soul, just kind of, you know, shining their light and just this awareness that the goodness is living inside of every one of us. That was what kind of came to me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, folks could feel free to share in the chat, or if you want to speak it briefly.
My simple act of goodness that I focused on was as I was bike riding in a nearby park this morning, there was a dad that had 4 kids on little act of kindness and teaching his children just touched me because he had such a big smile and he was so gracious and just kind to let me go by.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. Would anyone else feel called to share? I know we're just getting comfortable.
I can share mine. It's just my partner and I have a practice of holding hands before we eat. Just taking a moment of quiet and blessing the food together. And she'll often put her hand out like this, you know, and I'll put my hand in hers. And it's just a very sweet moment of connection, both with each other and then with the sense of presence and the food and the earth. Anna Carter's writing in the chat, I teach kindergarten this past week. Students that are brand new to each other didn't think twice about helping out, picking up toys another student dropped. Their simple kindness always brings my heart joy. Thanks, Anna. We have so much to learn from children. And the reminder that we don't enter this world hating, that we have to be taught to hate. We have to be taught to fear each other.
What I'm finding so interesting too is that all of our comments are all related to a connection with the other. All connected with that space in between person. That connection. Yeah.
Yeah, that meditation was so nourishing and sustaining. Um, and I wondered if we could talk a little bit about, uh, you know, the meditation really was around what we've been talking about, holding the discomfort, sitting with the discomfort. And, but before you kind of get to the point of holding it and sitting with it, there's the recognition of what you're feeling and what's coming up for you. And I think often a desire to avoid, or run away or push, suppress whatever is coming up. And so, helping, what advice do you have in terms of just kind of recognizing what's there and not trying to suppress and avoid it?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Kirsten. Am I saying your name? Is it Kirsten or Kirsten?
Kirsten.
Kirsten. Okay.
Don't worry though, I get that all the time.
There's another Kirsten in my life I work with. Okay. Yeah. So thanks for naming that. There's these different phases, right? These different kind of, not quite steps, but just kind of, it's a process. It's an unfolding of even recognizing what we're feeling, the habitual reactions to, you mentioned avoid or suppress, try to get away from it. That's one side of the extreme. The other side of the extreme, which can be just as deeply ingrained and not helpful, is to get lost in the feeling, to be completely consumed or identified with it. So the recognition of those patterns, and then the possibility of what mindfulness offers a lot of support and training for, is to be with the feeling, to be with it, this capacity to experience and feel what's happening without it taking over, without it becoming the whole picture. And it's a really subtle balance, particularly with strong emotions. And in myself, I find it's just like balance, you balance on the balance beam, it's not rigid, it's fluid, and you're kind of losing your balance and finding it again. It's the same thing with our emotions and our reactions to life, that we will inevitably kind of move in and out of getting lost in the feeling or consumed by it, or then avoiding it and pulling away from it. So how to work with those tendencies, how to work with those habits. I think for me, the first and most important thing is developing a sense of respect for them, not demonizing them, not believing that they're the enemy, that there's something wrong, that I have to stop doing this, I need to get away from it, but actually acknowledging, oh, this pattern, this habit of avoiding my emotions, trying to pretend they're not there, to push them down, or getting lost in them, getting consumed by them, is there because it's what's helped me get through life in some way. That I haven't had other tools or other resources to navigate and metabolize what I've been feeling. So that for me is a really important first step. Otherwise we end up getting into a struggle with our own mind and our own heart. And in this kind of tragic and ironic way, reenacting the same patterns of control and domination that are at the heart of patriarchy, racism, and oppression. We just do it internally. Like I have to destroy and control that part of my mind in order to get to this other part that's good. And so, the vision of beloved community that's at the heart of nonviolence is that we are able to meet the energies of confusion and fear and oppression and violence with a kind of unconditional love. So, and that includes our own tendencies to avoid and suppress and run away from and sink and spin, all of that. So the first the first thing I would say is this sense of not demonizing them and recognizing, oh wow, You know, this is a part of me that's been trying to help. It's trying to help me cope. It's trying to help me survive. Then we can start to bring some care, some love, some empathy, not just to the emotion. So let's say it's shame. Let's say it's feeling ashamed about something, that sense of being small and there's something wrong with me and I should know better. And then there's the resistance to the shame. So the first thing to meet, if we're resisting it, is the actual resistance. And to just notice what that experience is like. And then once we're able to be with the resistance, then the shame can reveal itself. So what's coming up for folks just hearing this suggestion that these patterns of avoidance aren't the enemy, that they're just maladaptive strategies. And if we can start to relate to them with some understanding and patience and love, that can start to create a little bit more flexibility in the system to integrate what's happening. Is this making sense? Are there questions? Something you want to follow up with?
I would ask, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could speak, I guess I would say that I was a bit surprised by it from what you're saying, but it kind of is the kind of the path that actually does make sense when you think about it, when you actually do it. Because I've kind of been trying to address some of these issues in my life also, and I think that I was probably going the opposite way or trying different things that I wasn't really finding success. But this issue, I think of if I understand correctly, what you're saying is the just being present with it, but bringing in some of that loving kindness and acceptance, and just being patient with those.
Mm-hmm.
As a strategy. I think that I hadn't thought of sort of bringing all those elements in there.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. It was a beautiful way of restating it. And I think also just to be clear here that there's a line between this sense of patience and kindness and coddling ourselves or indulgence, right? Where we can start to actually, you know, the mind is so slippery. How we can hear something like this and say, oh, Oren said it's fine to avoid the feelings, so I'm just going to be with my avoidance and then not look at that stuff, right? There's this sense of actually being really deeply rooted in a clear intention of wakefulness, of courage, of transformation. And so the space that we create when it's needed to be with the resistance is in service of looking really deeply and clearly at whatever we're resisting. And then to say I'll add one more piece here, and then I think there were a couple of other people who seemed like we're about to share, ask a question. To acknowledge that there are times where we don't need that step. You know, we notice some resistance, and the noticing is enough. Sometimes just the noticing of the resistance is enough to go like, oh yeah, I'm resisting. And in that noticing, it can settle and we can go straight to being with the discomfort and working at the edge of our tolerance to bear with it, staying grounded and seeing what comes up in that process. So I saw Stefan asked a question here in the chat, and then it seemed like there might have been one or two other folks who were gonna share. So Stefan, I'm tracking your, Stephen, I'm tracking your question. I want to see if there was someone else who was going to comment either on what Andy said or what I was sharing. Okay, so maybe I'll respond to your comment, Stephen, which was how can we be aware when that maladaptive strategy, say avoidance, is a habit and therefore not conscious? How do we see what we can't see? Right. This is kind of the fundamental question for those of us who occupy various positions of privilege in our society, whether it's whiteness or being male or being heterosexual or able-bodied, right? How can I see the things I don't see? This is, I think, one of the core purposes of community and relationship and allyship and solidarity, is that we rely on each other to point out the things that we can't see sometimes. This is one of the things that I find so beautiful and inspiring about the program and the community that both of you have created, Lynn and Kirsten, right, is that it acts as a mirror, right? Those of you who have done the 30-day challenge, you know, watching those videos from EJI or reading the reports that they put out, right? Like it invites us to confront the things that we haven't seen. So in some sense, it's difficult, if not impossible, to see those areas that we're unconscious of, because by definition, we're unconscious of them. So we need something to poke us, to kind of poke us and go like, oh, I'm not seeing something there. And so sometimes that poke comes from another person. Sometimes that poke comes from reading something or seeing something. I think there's also a way, what I've seen in myself is there's a way that through contemplative practice, spiritual practice, or other forms of awareness practice, we start to get familiar with some of the signs or signals of ignorance. So comfort is one. When we're really comfortable, it's a good place to look and check out and say, where is this comfort coming from? Right? There's a kind of comfort that comes from actually being clear-eyed and open. And there's a kind of comfort that comes from being insulated and not seeing or having everything be the way we want. So comfort can be a sign that there's something we're not seeing. Being reactive or resistant, getting self-righteous, it can be a sign that there's something we're not seeing. A certain quality of listlessness or apathy, a certain quality of routine, habit. It's kind of a being on automatic, has a certain deadness to it that I feel when I'm in that zone. That's another sign. So in addition to getting those reflections and pokes from outside, we can start to get a sense of what is the internal space like when I'm not seeing something. One thing that one of my meditation teachers said a couple years ago, I was on a retreat with him, that stayed with me was feeling comfortable is not an appropriate response to what we're living through. Right? There's that sense of, if I'm not uncomfortable, what the heck am I doing today? Right? Like the life support systems of the planet are breaking down. The very mechanisms of democracy here in the US and in many places abroad are being fundamentally torn apart and challenged. People don't have enough to eat or places to sleep or can barely make rent. Like, if I'm not uncomfortable, what am I doing?
Well, and that's where it just feels like, you know, everyone just feels like they're on their own little island and they're not able to see that that we're all interconnected, and that what's happening to someone across the country is also affecting us personally as well.
Mm-hmm.
And once we see that we are all interconnected, that maybe there'll be a little bit more fire for people to kind of engage, you know, and that the internal will be ignited. But it seems like you said, you know, it doesn't really affect me. I'm kind of distancing myself from it. You know, it's not as proximate to me. So therefore, I can just kind of sit in my comfort. But yet at the same time, it's really toxic for someone who's doing that as well. Like you said, it's time to kind of, it's a call to action, the call of our time, certainly.
Right, and the point you're making, Lynn, that action is dependent upon the recognition of our interconnection, kind of waking up from the delusion of our separation. Yeah.
Did you notice Allison's comment? I'm finding that
No.
the way I meet addressing racism/injustice brings up a stress response that I use in my life generally. Sense of urgency, panic, and sometimes avoidance. This is the same way I handle other stuff in my life. There's no difference.
Yeah, thanks, Allison, for naming that and for seeing it's an important insight there, right? How we see that these patterns can be universal, right? Which also means the good news that can be daunting, it can be overwhelming, particularly when we start to see one of those patterns. We're like, oh my gosh, like this is running my life. Whenever something hard comes up, this is how I respond. It's like, oh no, how do I even deal with this? It can feel daunting or overwhelming. At the same time, the fact that that pattern is so pervasive means that you can work on it anywhere. And it's like a fractal, right? Like each part contains the whole. So what that means is that when you're pissed at your partner or roommate for the way that they load the dishwasher, and you notice yourself, you know, going into that stress response of panic and trying to avoid it because you want to avoid the conflict of having an uncomfortable conversation, like you recognize like this really doesn't matter. And yet the same reaction is happening. Okay, you can actually work on that pattern because it's a really low stakes situation in some ways. And working on the pattern will affect the other areas because you're building understanding and capacity. So these patterns of avoiding discomfort, we can build capacity and understanding to work with them in any area of our life. So in the meditation tradition that I'm a part of in early Buddhist practice, one of the phrases that gets used sometimes is the phrase training in being with unpleasant sensation. Just contemplate that for a moment. Training in being with unpleasant sensation. There's a lot in that phrase because, or another translation of it, I'm translating from the Pali language, is training in being with painful experience. So what's our tendency in response to painful experience or unpleasant sensation? It's to make it go away, to get away from it. We don't like it, stop it. And of course, if there are things in our lives that are painful or difficult or unpleasant and we can resolve them, we do. It's not that we're masochistic, but there's so much in life that we can't get away from or resolve. And as we're talking about here, certain things that are actually require us being able to stay with discomfort and pain in order to resolve or be in line with our values or embody the love and compassion that we want to see in the world. So we need to build capacity to be able to do that. And just like anything else, to build capacity, we have to train ourselves. So I think it's helpful to start to think about this work of anti-racism, anti-oppression in a much broader context. And I think again, this is one of the core principles behind this community, as far as I understand it, is it's about integrating it into our lives as part of our daily living, not just this one thing we do sometimes. And so one aspect of that is looking at where are the places in my life where I experience something uncomfortable or painful, and how do I respond to that? I'm stuck at the bank in line and there's some person in front of me who I am, like livid at because they're taking so long and they're not aware of the other people around them, or at the post office, or, okay, so that person is driving you nuts in that moment. It's really unpleasant experience. How do we relate to it? What's the experience internally of being with an uncomfortable situation? Are we able to breathe? Are we able to find some semblance of patience? Are we able to stay present in our own body? Or do we pull out the phone and check out to avoid the unpleasant feeling? So in that moment, pulling out the device or whatever it is that we do to avoid the unpleasant feeling, that's the same pattern that we will see when we turn on the news and we see, the latest installment of state-sanctioned violence against Black lives, or you name whatever it is that we're responding to and feeling overwhelmed with. These are not separate, because it's one mind, it's one heart that we're living with. And so we can work to build capacity and courage and stamina to be with discomfort in any situation in our life. And when we can do it with something small, like being stuck in a line or traffic, or, one of my things that gets me is people chewing with their mouth open. I was raised in a Jewish family, and the table manners were like drilled into me with the fear of God that, thou shalt not chew with your mouth open. It's like so I have this like a visceral reaction in my nervous system that's completely illogical when I'm sitting with someone and they're chewing with their mouth open, because something inside of me is afraid I'm going to get yelled at, by my family or something. It's just unpleasant. It's just a sound. So the more, so like working with something like that that doesn't really matter. But the internal experience on the level of sensation in the mind is the same patterning of reactivity. We can build capacity there so that the next time, say I get a reflection from someone, a colleague of color, that says, like, hey, dude, that was a microaggression. You need to check yourself. Boom. Okay, reactivity. Let me explain myself. It's not what I meant. Whatever the response is that comes up. Have I built the capacity to be with the discomfort of an unpleasant sensation? And if I have, there's a lot more likelihood that I can draw on the learning and the understanding that I have and make a different choice in that moment. I'm seeing a comment here from Kathy. I'm dismayed that while I think of white Americans as folks who want quick solutions, take a course, read a book, and then you've got it, and surely I do not fall prey to that mindset, yet here I am expecting myself to get there faster. I'm left with just being present continually with my discomfort. Yeah, thanks, Kathy, for echoing that tension and that pattern.
It seems also like the resiliency that you're kind of speaking about, that, training the capacity to be resilient is something that almost, is these basic needs that we need to make sure, just as individuals, that we have created this kind of bubble of self-care around ourselves, so that we do have, kind of that capacity to see the other, to see the moment when it comes towards us in an aggressive way or in something that's discomforting, that we, are making sure that we are in a place that we can meet that experience. And I feel like for me, making sure you're getting enough sleep, making sure that you're not spending so much time in front of a device, making sure that you're spending time outside in nature where there is beauty all around us. that, doing those kinds of things adds to that resiliency, so that what you do have the ability to train that muscle, so that when you do see anger, that you say, oh, hello, old friend, right? Oh, you're here to teach me something and I need to work on myself for some reason or another. That I think builds that capacity that you're talking about.
Absolutely. You mentioned needs, and that was maybe another thing we wanted to bring in to the conversation here. So one of the other things that I practice and teach is this work of nonviolent communication that Dr. Marshall Rosenberg founded, and that framework that comes out of humanistic psychology from Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow of human needs is I think another very, very useful one that we can draw on in this work, both in terms of seeing our own humanity, meeting ourselves with compassion, as well as humanizing the other, seeing those on the other side of the conversation, of different political persuasion, opposing views, being able to have a really robust framework to recollect their humanity. And so the core concept here for anyone who's unfamiliar with it is that part of what makes us human, that the part of the kind of definition of a human being is that we're motivated in life to meet fundamental universal needs. So plants turn towards light, little amoebas turn towards food and try to get it, so that the human heart is motivated to fulfill or satisfy underlying universal needs. And so these are not just physiological needs for food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, and so forth, but relational needs for things like belonging, community, contribution, understanding, play, love, touch, humor, companionship, safety, and what are sometimes called spiritual needs or higher needs, that we don't just exist on the material plane, we don't just exist on the relational plane, but there's a part of our heart and consciousness that is oriented to something larger, something beyond the sense of self, and that a human being needs a sense of purpose, meaning, connection with something larger than ourselves. And so we can see our own actions, our own thoughts and behaviors, and we can see the thoughts, behaviors, views, and actions of others through this lens, through this perspective. And it's the perspective, it's kind of like going back to where we started from with basic goodness, this capacity of care and connection that is part of what makes the human family, that we have survived this long through being able to cooperate with one another. That same kind of basic goodness, it gets elaborated on, and we can see each other's actions and choices as attempts to meet our needs. And that word attempt is the key, because they're not always successful, they're not always conscious, they're not always wise. So actions of harm, it's not that we say, oh, well, that person's just meeting their needs, so it's fine. It's not the action. We can still condemn an action. We can still resist it. We can still take powerful steps to try to limit someone's options to engage in acts that are harmful, while seeing the humanity beneath them, while seeing, oh, this person is trying to protect their community, trying to, live a life that's in line with their values. They're coming from a place of integrity. Even though I disagree with their values, I can still connect with a sense that they have a sense of integrity. So if we look deeply enough, we can see those seeds or facets of humanity in something that's universal.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love the MBC and wanted to see if you want to talk a little more of a few ways that there might be some takeaways for how people can apply that when it comes around race and humanizing the other, and kind of getting out of the othering that's so rampant in American culture.
Mm-hmm. I think that one of the core skills here is the capacity to learn how to see through that lens. And it's something, again, that takes training, that takes practice, because when another person's views or actions or speech is dangerous, when it's threatening the life and the safety of our own community, or our friends and neighbors, the instinctive response, which is I think important and needs to be integrated, is to defend against and reject the action or the statement. And so I think the move is to recognize the difference between a response that is protective, that recognizes, this is dangerous, like our president's talking about the coronavirus as the China virus, right, which has created the conditions for violence against Asian Americans. Recognizing like that kind of language is not only divisive, it's dangerous. I mean, I chose the most difficult person, I think, for me in the example, to humanize, to be able to see, to distinguish between the action and see, what is the human need behind that, right? Whether it's the deep psychology, the longing to be loved and accepted, to be seen through eyes of admiration. It seems like one of the core motivations of our president today, to be seen in that way, which I can certainly relate to. I want people to see me, with a loving gaze, to see my strength and goodness and admire me, or the desire for a sense of agency and power in life, that I have some capacity to affect my world. It's a very core need for human beings to feel powerful, to feel like I have some say in my life. So I think what this does is it protects our own heart from hatred, first and foremost. It protects our own heart from falling prey to the very thing that we're fighting against, which is the sense of creating an other, creating an enemy, and then being at war with them. So it's not that we don't condemn an action. It's not that we don't speak out against it. It's not that we don't take steps to hold others accountable. But where are those actions coming from inside? Are they coming from hatred and fear and a recapitulation of the same psychology and dynamic that creates an other, demonizes it, and says we have to defeat this and destroy it? That's racism. That's the dynamic of oppression. So in truly liberatory anti-oppression and anti-racism work sees no enemies. It sees only the human family and sees the confusion at the heart of hate, at the heart of divisiveness. And so it's an incredibly empowering practice and perspective, because it frees our own heart from reinforcing and recreating those dynamics, which means that when we are able in the moments, and I say in the moments because I see this as an ongoing practice, because that pattern of othering and demonizing and dominating is so deeply rooted. When we're able to inhabit those moments of seeing the actions and the pattern and calling that out rather than demonizing the person, in those moments, I believe that we are bringing into being the world of equity and justice and beloved community that we want to create.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely.
We have a comment. Did you see that one about safety? This
No.
person has a need for safety. They're trying to maintain the situation that gives them comfort. Perhaps white people who resist looking at white privilege or systemic racism fear the loss of their comfort.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I would agree with that. I would also want to look deeper. And this is a great example, because one of the hallmarks of this practice, this view of human needs at the heart of nonviolent communication, is that when we get to the level of needs, we feel a sense of compassion and connection and alignment, right? Because the definition of need is a terrible word for it, because it conjures up all kinds of cultural connotations of neediness and demand, which is not what we mean. We mean these kind of essential core motivating factors of the heart. There's too many words. We're saying, the essential core motivating factor, right? You just say, okay, a need. But when I think about a white person's need for safety and comfort, I don't necessarily want them to have that safety and comfort, because that's coming at the expense of justice and equity and physical safety of other beings. So I want to look a little bit deeper, because I think, well, that's their strategy. What is it that they really need? What is it that they really want that I actually also value and support innately? Right. So Jenny is pointing to this this tool that we have in nonviolent communication of saying, okay, if they had that, then what would they have? So if they had that comfort and safety, then what would they have? Would it be a sense of belonging? Would it be a sense of, predictability and stability in life? Like, I want everyone to have enough stability that they can get by. Or it could be belonging. It depends, or it depends on the person and on the situation. But I hope that you can see the difference between seeing someone and connecting with their need for the desire for comfort, which I wouldn't say is a need, and a longing to belong, a longing to have stability.
Allison had an interesting comment. Did you see that one?
Yeah, so Allison's bringing into the conversation this example of people who cover up Black Lives Matter murals that are approved, sanctioned art. Example, a couple in Martinez who painted over the city Black Lives Matter mural and claimed there's no oppression or racism. That's left-wing media, not reality. So they're, making the other wrong. So what are those, those people's needs? One need that I'm hearing there is a need for shared reality. they have a deep need for understanding and shared reality. So based on, right, the information they're absorbing and their interpretation of current events and history, you know, they're not seeing the oppression and violence in the same way. And so I would imagine even, I can even see in that statement, again, I don't agree, but I can see in that statement, there's no oppression or racism. I can almost see like a deep longing for a sense of brotherhood and kinship in humanity, and a sense of harmony and celebrating the good. I don't agree with the strategy or the view, but I think that like the people on the right and in conservative circles who, quote, celebrate American values, there's an aspect of that I can understand as wanting to honor the goodness in people's hearts, and an inability to hold the tension of there being contradiction in our realities, that we can have a good heart and still do and say things that are racist and harmful, and the two don't cancel each other out.
Right, but what I'm saying though is that, you know, someone who does something like that is kind of in a place where they're living in their own comfort,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so they're not able to see past their comfort,
Mm-hmm.
to see where maybe they need to work on their own muscle, right, and come awake to what's happening around them. And I think that's where we're having that disconnect.
Yeah.
People really aren't able to see that.
Yeah. I'm so glad you named that. So what you're pointing to here is, so how do we get from here to there?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So what I see, and this is, I want to be really clear, like this is one angle, right? This is one approach. And there are different approaches, there are different tactics, there are different strategies. So the approach that I feel most aligned with is the approach that says, all right, so here's this couple or here who is holding a view that's limited, that's perpetuating policies and dynamics that are harmful. So now I would say it's part of my work as another white person to connect with these people and have the hard conversation that invites them to stretch, to look at their comfort. So what's the most effective way to do that? From my view, the most effective way to do that is not to condemn them and judge them and say, you're living in a narrow view and you're attached to your comfort and you need to wake up, because that's just going to make them dig their heels in more. My strategy would be to say, wow, here's what I'm hearing, that, you know, it's so disturbing for you to see people demonstrating for Black Lives Matter because you really value the American ethics of brotherhood and sisterhood and siblinghood, if we're going to be inclusive, and you want to celebrate the goodness at the core of American society. Am I getting that? You know, yeah, why aren't these people celebrating, you know, the goodness in it? So I want to join them in the positive values that I see them speaking to. So they start to feel seen and heard and affirmed, not for their strategies, but for what it is in their heart that I see as good underneath it. Now I'm building relationship. And now now we're actually having a conversation, and there's space for me to say, you know, I see it differently. I really hear what you value, and I value that too. And there are other things that I see that are different. You open to hearing how I'm seeing it. If I've shown them respect and affirmed the goodness in their heart, they have all the more reason to listen to me. And now there's the possibility of inviting them to stretch and actually having a conversation where I'm able to challenge them. So we're coming to the end of our time. I see there's another question here. Can I make a question about anger in the anti-racist way, the rage I feel against other white people? Maybe we can take this question and have this be the last thing we explore.
Yeah, it sounds like, we're really getting to the good jewels inside of this conversation right now, and really just digging into this work. And I just hope and invite everyone to continue to think about these questions, and to certainly get in touch to talk more about it, because it's an ongoing conversation. But yes, Oren, if you don't mind just answering that last question.
Yeah, well, do you want to, I'm not sure if your name is Camila. If you want to say a little bit more about it, I don't know if you can unmute yourself. What is the question? Is it just how to deal with that rage, or do you want to say more about it?
Yeah, hi Oren and Kirsten and Lynn and Mo, and it's just like there's a controversy, a huge controversy here today in this weekend, but it's just another more. And so I'm not sure if I tell you a little bit. Can I?
Please.
So a huge web of stores opened a trainee process only for Black people on Friday for the first time. And like, I'm just feeling there's so much emotion for me saying this, because it's, as far as I know, and I can be wrong, it's the first time in this country that a huge web of magazines does something like that. And there was a lot of celebration talking about myself, and immediately after, like, there's a huge controversy here. Like they are already being threatened of suffering judicial process by white people that are accusing them of being racists against white people. And so right now I'm feeling so much anger.
Camila, you're breaking up a little. I think if you turn your video off, we might get your sound more clearly.
Trying, like,
did you hear that?
Yeah, I think she said that she was feeling anger towards the white Brazilians.
Right.
It's better now. Is it
Yeah.
better now?
Yeah, let me just say back what I'm hearing so far and make sure I'm getting it, which is this chain of stores opened for Black people.
Are you listening to me? Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a slight delay. I was just going to summarize what I heard so far to make sure I was getting the details correctly. Can I do that? Okay, so I heard this chain of stores opened up. It was specifically catering only to Black people. It was the first time this happened in Brazil. And there was one part of the community that was celebrating this. And then there was a backlash by the white community that was criticizing it and saying this is racism against white people.
Yeah.
And you felt a lot of anger towards the white community for not understanding, I'm interpreting now, for not understanding the value and the importance of this moment. Yeah, am I getting it?
Yeah.
And so what, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and when I try to understand them, because in the way they express, they are really, for me, it's clear, they are really feeling fear of losing, like jobs, for example. And I can relate to that, because when the quota politics began here, I was super alienated, and okay, I know this fear, and I know it's
right.
It's like, but at the same time, now knowing what I know now, I'm I'm so angry, and I
Mhm.
know I can be so violent, you know,
Mm, mm.
and yeah,
So is the question the main, because there's a lot in what you bring up. I mean, the situation is really complicated, and there's so many directions we could go in with this. And I just want to check if the question, part of the question you're asking is just internally how to handle and deal with the rage
yeah,
and the anger you're feeling. Am I getting it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
because I know I
yeah,
can reproduce
sure,
violence. Yeah,
sure. Thank you. Yeah. Well, again, I think just going back to where we started from, I think it's really important to honor your experience first and foremost. You know, you recognize the danger of it. So that's there. That's great. You can trust that. But that anger is there as it's in part it's responding to something that you perceive as unjust. So it's connected to your values, and it's trying to stand up and protect. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is to honor the anger. Feel the strength of it and the power of it. It's because it's connected to something very, very deep in you that's important. And so for me, that's the first approach is honoring and accessing both the strength, the power, the energy of it, and then seeing what is determining what is the anger responding to that's accurate. There's something you're discerning. There's something that you are observing that says this is not right. So to get really clear about what is the actual aspect of the situation that you recognize is unjust or not right. So is it the misunderstanding that there can be reverse racism and not actually understanding what racism means? You know, is it the lack of empathy and understanding that that this is a response to? Then the second thing I would encourage is then see if you can tease apart the protective energy of the anger from the hostility, from the aspect of the anger that's cruelty, that's wanting to cause harm. And you can start to purify the anger from the part that's actually harmful to the part that's helpful. So there's more we could say there, but I'm aware that we're over time, and I want to honor everyone's time here. So I hope that's helpful, Camila. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And, you know, I just have to say that at the tail end of that, you know, it was sort of Lynn and ours own anger and frustration about what's happening in America that really, you know, there is obviously the sitting with the emotion, there's dealing with it, but then there's for us the part of activism and what could we do to, you know, we use that anger and that rage and all of the things that we feel as Black people, as mothers to Black sons, as descendants of enslaved people, to channel it into something where we're trying to make change for good in the world. And so I think that, you know, as many people are grappling with these things, there are small things you can do in your own life that you can take that anger and you can turn it into a force for good. So thank you. We're honored to have Oren here and all of you here. It was a wonderful, inspiring and supportive event, nourishing. We offer our work, our platform, our offerings as a gift to help common humanity, similar to in the Buddhist tradition where there's a gift of dana, which is an expression of generosity and gratitude as a way of valuing the teachings and the offerings as a way to help sustain the well-being of the people offering those. We invite you, if you feel moved to support our work, that you can do so on our website by buying us a cup of coffee. And we just want to thank you for joining us. We thank Oren for his generosity of his time and his wisdom. So thank you.
Great. I want to just thank both of you for inviting me, for the work that you're doing, and would just say, you know, any support anyone can offer to Lynn and Kirsten for this work, please do so. And rather than donating to me, anything you'd want to offer to me for this time, please give to them to continue supporting this community.
Thank you, Oren. Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you again soon.
Take care, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.